I began to get quiet first, and so I began to get silenced, and I stopped talking. I began to withdraw, and that's not me at all.
Over the last few months, Darnisha Weary of Edmonds started noticing a shift in her personality. Even as she seemed busy and driven, protesting for racial justice, opening up a new business, a coffee shop, she realized she was living a muted version of herself. She was suffering from racism.
I was experiencing some serious racism, overt racism in the workplace. I received some pretty nasty emails with monkeys in them. I was called some pretty nasty names.
Weary worked at a white nonprofit where racist emails intensified. It was too much to bear.
I ended up having a cardiac episode and had to be rushed to the hospital. They thought I was having a heart attack. I went through all these tests, right? And then it came down to it was stress related. It was stress caused. It was caused by stress. And I didn't realize that this pandemic and this racial uprising was affecting me in such a way.
What Darnisha Weary is talking about is racial trauma. It's even got a scientific name, race-based traumatic stress, RBTS. According to Mental Health America, it's a mental and emotional injury caused by encounters with racial bias, ethnic discrimination, racism, and hate crimes.
It's unique in the fact that with racial trauma, it's constantly happening, it's ongoing, whereas with PTSD, typically it's a singular event.
Ashley McGirt is a mental health therapist who specializes in racial trauma, a concept scientists have studied for more than 20 years, but is now gaining more attention.
We know that it exists by the way that Black and brown bodies respond. Currently, Black and brown bodies are experiencing chronic stress-related illnesses at disproportionate rates. We are dying at disproportionate rates, and we can attribute that a lot to racism because, we have more strokes, high blood pressure, chronic heart failure, a lot of these things that are attributed to stress.
Experts say RBTS can be traced down through generations. Darnisha Weary has seen that herself.
I think as Black women, I grew up watching my mom and my grandmother and all the women in my family work so hard to never say no. I need this. I saw them put others before themselves all the time.
If you think back to when Black people were enslaved, Black women were taking care of the slave master's children, breastfeeding them. They were doing all sorts of things to take care of the whole community. Can you imagine how significant of an amount of stress that can be?
Psychologist Dr. Katrina Sanford of Seattle says one of the keys to coping with racial trauma is understanding your ancestral connection.
If you don't know where your people come from, and that's one of the things that's a part of health, is being able to know yourself. And when you know yourself and you know you're the bomb and you know you're amazing, regardless of what society tells you, then that helps your health outcomes improve. It helps you physically be more healthy, it helps you mentally be more healthy, and it helps you spiritually be more healthy.
Dr. Sanford founded the healing center Niles Edge to do just that, a spiritual, now virtual space to help people connect to themselves, using therapies such as breathing exercises, sound and talk therapy, and meditation.
Niles Edge is trying to ensure that our people can now understand who they are, how their ancestors healed, and figure out ways to heal themselves so that we can continue to live in this society that oppresses us, but so that not just live in it, thrive and find joy in who we are, even though things are really difficult.
Remember how Darnisha opened up a new business? It wasn't just a financial venture, but part of a healing process that included therapy and a cup of Black coffee.
We kept looking for a space and a place to just be with our Black community in an area where there's it's pretty much white all around, and we could never find a place.
Since Darnisha and her husband couldn't find it, they created it.
Being a Black person here, in Black coffee, I'm allowed to be unapologetically Black. I don't have to code switch. I don't have to worry about if I'm too loud. I speak with my hands. I don't have to worry about, controlling that or controlling my facial figures. And these are things that I know that I have done throughout my life in the workplace, in my community, just to be safe, because I live in an all-white space.
So, how can we as a society find solutions for people suffering from racial trauma? Mental health experts say it begins with acknowledging this trauma exists and then finding empathy.
I want our businesses to understand that if someone needs a mental health break, that's okay. That the environment, not just in businesses, but in our society as a whole, allows for people to take that time that they need. Because you can't have someone at your job be able to do their job well and be productive if they're unhealthy, if they're unhappy, and if their mental health is struggling. And so that's where I hope we go, where we become more empathic about the physical and mental things that people are going through and allow them the space to heal and support them as they're doing it.
Sounds like a challenge to the companies to actually pay attention to mental health.
Absolutely.
Back to Darnisha's coffee shop, the safe space she's created. She hopes all people of color realize it's normal to struggle. But in order to heal, you've got to focus on caring for yourself.
The joy that I can't even explain. I've learned I have balance in my life right now, and things are not always perfect, but I know how to say no. I learn how to set boundaries. I take care of myself. I put it in my calendar to turn things off or to take a walk or to do something for myself. And so it's just so important for Black women because we're carrying so much every single day. We're carrying so many things we don't even realize we're carrying.
African Americans are a strong people, a seemingly infinitely resilient people. We have a long history of enduring and persevering through the severest of trials. Our ancestors endured slavery and persevered through Jim Crow. Evidence of these qualities can be seen today through our struggle for civil rights and our continuing pursuit for a level playing field. We are an industrious people. We have built communities under seemingly impossible circumstances. During the Great Depression, when the entire country was under enormous duress, we managed to care for one another with fewer resources than even the poorest of whites. Families gathered together, usually in churches, to help sustain large numbers of Blacks and see them through the extremely tough times. We are a creative people. Through slave times and the oppressive decades that followed, we established a distinctive culture replete with new languages, names, customs, and behaviors. We have invented our own games, foods, music, arts, and fashions. Many of us have managed to carve out a prosperous existence for what at times amounted to society's scraps. We are a just and forgiving people. Think about it. Despite the relentless oppression under which Blacks have lived since slavery, there has been no large-scale organized retaliatory terrorism fueled by hatred and a need for revenge. We have demonstrated time and time again that while we can courageously fight for justice, we are not crippled with hatred and rage, providing ourselves to be among the most magnanimous people right here on earth and the most magnanimous people right here in America. So, healing from injuries past. Certainly, we need to heal from our historical injuries, and we need to do more. We need to become healthy, like they said in the clip. Healing will take us only part of the way. Healing will take us only part of the way. Healing will only take us part of the way. Working towards health and well-being will take us to our goal. It'll be a piece of it. It is important that we discuss this distinction. There is a significant difference between not being sick and being well. If we are to heal and become healthy, we will do so by building upon our strengths. We will need to draw upon our inner fortitude, resilience, and endurance. We will need to tap into our industriousness and creativity. We will need to avail ourselves of our time, of our innate sense of justice, as well as our productivity for acceptance. Most of all, we have to apply our spirituality and ability to love to the task before us. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, and this is chapter 6, the final chapter in Dr. Joy DeGruy, her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing. And just to catch you up real quick on what we've all read. So start out in chapter 1 is I Don't Even Know This Race on page 18. Then we went to Hold to 3/5 Dehumanization on page 46. Crimes Against Humanity is chapter 3 on page 70. Chapter 4 is Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, page 110. Chapter 5 is Slavery's Children's, last video, page 140. And chapter 6 is Healing, page 178. And that's where we are, healing. But I started on page 182 at the first paragraph. African Americans are strong people. So in the video, they mentioned, I think, racial-based traumatic stress. Racial-based traumatic stress, that's just another word for what we've been talking about for the last 5 videos, post-traumatic slave syndrome. They're talking about what Dr. Joy DeGruy has been talking about. They are a bit incorrect as well, as far as some of the stuff that they were saying. As far as within the Black community, especially the Black conscious community in the Black circles, they've been studying the effects of slavery for more than 20 years. I know that. I've been studying it myself for 20 years. So it's been going on longer than that. If you go back to Amos Wilson, Colby Cambone, even Francis Cress Welsing, Neely Fuller, and stuff like that, effects of slavery has been studied since the 50s, 60s, 70s, right? Probably longer than that. So they are a bit wrong in that. But they said race-based traumatic stress, and we're talking about post-traumatic slave syndrome in a nutshell. That's what the video was talking about. But it was talking about from the angle of healing from the trauma, because that's what we want to focus on today, is healing from the trauma. But as we've already established, healing from the trauma is only part of the solution. It's only one weapon in the tool belt that we have, right? It's one component, healing from the trauma. But how do we heal from over 400 years and this continuous trauma that we face as Black people? Now, another thing in the video is, I know they were talking to a woman. I know they were talking to a Black woman, but we have to stop looking at the trauma of racism as how it only affects women. Slavery and racism affected both Black men and Black women. And we have to start being honest about that. Yes, while the Black woman faced her particular traumas during slavery, well, guess what? The Black man, and this is the joke that me, PC, and Pat made. Because the Black man was not at Disney World at the Super Bowl during slavery. The Black man was facing his particular type of trauma, and the Black woman was facing her particular type of trauma, right? We're not in a who had the worst type of trauma Olympic game or some kind of competition. We're not doing that either. It's not what we're doing. But what we are establishing and what we are making note of is both Black men and Black women suffered from trauma, from slavery and racism, both sides. So we have to talk about total healing for all of us. Matter of fact, let me go a step further. Black men, women, and children suffered the trauma of slavery and racism. Black men, women, and children, right? So we have to be able to look at it from a holistic view, because these are the people who are going to make up our society. These are the people who do make up our society. You can't only focus on the trauma of Black women. You have to focus on the trauma that Black women and Black men experienced. We have to. And remember, and shout out to the sister in the video. Let me just say this. So she was working in the white space and experienced racism working in the white space, and was fortunate enough to remove herself from that white space and create her own space. And we should be creating our own spaces, but you cannot outrun racism. You have to defeat it. Remember that. You cannot outrun racism. You have to defeat it. And if you build it, you must protect it. So let's pick up our reading back on page 183 at the bottom paragraph. So talking about healing from the trauma of slavery. So how do we do this? I certainly don't have all the answers. I suspect no one person does, but I believe I have a few with which to begin. Completing our works will take more thought, research, and insight, and we will need contributions from many within the outside of our community. In chapter 4, we discussed the 3 primary patterns of behavior associated with post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is vacant esteem, ever-present danger, and racial socialization. In chapter 8, we examined some of their manifestations in our culture today. It is now time to consider establishing new, healthier patterns of behavior. We have to establish new patterns of behavior, right? Patterns that will be the foundation upon which a new and powerful legacy can develop. Rather than crush self-esteem, we must do everything in our power to build it. Rather than be torn down by the anger that is present within us, we must be able to create and maintain a state of inner well-being. Rather than allow our children to be socialized by a racist society, we must continuously and deliberately educate and socialize them to understand their inherent nobility. So